Hello, we are about to get started. We'll give everyone another minute or so to join. All right, we are at one after, so I'm going to just go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Multnomah Group's webinar, Smarter Retirement Planning for the Public Sector. Really excited to have you here today. A little bit about Multnomah Group to get us started. We are a retirement plan consulting firm. We work with public and private sector organizations to create effective and efficient retirement plans. You can see here a few stats about us. My name is Haley Fields. I am a principal and consultant with Multnomah Group. You've got my contact information here. I work with private, public, and not-for-profit organizations as a consultant in Oregon, Washington, and California. Today, we are talking about the public sector defined contribution retirement plan. So a few things that we're going to cover today, talk a little bit about the landscape of those plans and recent history. We're going to talk about some common inefficiencies that we see with public DC plans. We'll also talk about why transparency is really critical to these plans. We have a case study with some practical solutions and outcomes of the work we've done with a public entity recently. And finally, we have some recommendations to improve outcomes through some best practices. Again, with an eye towards efficiency, I'm going to go ahead and dive right into the landscape of public defined contribution retirement plans. These have historically been seen as a supplemental benefit. Uh, Public sector employees typically have access to a state or federal or other entity pension plan, and often a deferred compensation plan through that state or federal system. And so the retirement plans offered by the cities, states, and other organizations have been seen as a supplemental benefit, right? A much less critical component of the overall retirement benefit received as a public employee. Recently, that has begun to shift, and these plans have become more and more important for a handful of reasons. There have been changes to the public pension system that mean that many folks need to save additional money in order to have a successful retirement. So we've seen the importance of saving outside of the public pension system increase. We've also seen these plans be used in recruitment and intention efforts in the same way that private sector plans have been used for decades. So, attracting and retaining talent to your organization is a key component of these defined contribution or deferred compensation plans. And finally, we've also seen them used as part of the negotiation and to meet the needs of collective bargaining units and negotiations there. So again, these plans have been around for a long time. Typically, they're 401A or 457B plans, but we've seen them become increasingly important as a component to the overall human resource relationship between organizations and their employees. These plans have been historically underserved by the retirement advisor marketplace. So, private sector employers have used retirement plan consultants and advisors for many, many years. And the majority of plans work with an advisor already. That is not the case typically with these public plans. Few of them have advisors and are not receiving the same kind of outreach that many private sector employers have seen. And so typically the relationship for these retirement plans is really just the record keeper, the provider to the plan, and the organization sponsoring that plan. And those are the two players. And it leaves the sponsoring the plan sponsor in a difficult position of doing that oversight for the record keeper without any assistance or specific industry expertise. And finally, these plans have lacked a lot of transparency that the private sector has seen over the past few years, in the past, frankly, several decades, because of the requirements of ERISA. So let's dig into a little bit about that transparency. So private sector plans are governed not only by the IRS, as are governmental DC plans, but also by ERISA, which is the body of law that oversees benefit plans in the private sector. ERISA requires 5,500 filings, that's annual filings with the Department of Labor, about some of the key components of the plan, participants, investments, fees paid to service providers, those kinds of things. Those are publicly available. It also requires specific participant fee disclosures, which allows additional oversight and transparency around the fees that participants are paying. And finally, ERISA requires annual independent audits for plans that have over 100 participants. All of these components are not required for governmental defined contribution plans. And so you do not get the required transparency that comes with these filings and disclosures. This is in contrast to, I think, what we typically think about for public organizations, which is more transparency than their private sector counterparts with the open meeting laws and all of the clear, transparent requirements that governmental organizations are required to do. This is a place where we see a lot less of that. Finally, we're also seeing some procurement challenges with public plans. Another key component, I think, of governmental organizations is a really strong procurement process, open bids, requirements for regular bids for all kinds of services. The retirement plan has not typically been part of that procurement process for a couple of reasons. Most retirement plan and record keeper service agreements are evergreen contracts, meaning that they are not renewed at a specific time. They are ongoing year over year. Additionally, the folks leading the procurement process typically lack subject matter expertise around retirement plan fees and services. And there are hidden costs in proprietary products. Most fees related to the retirement plan are not a budget item within your overall organization. The fees are typically paid by the plan and by participants within that plan. And so, again, circumvents most of the typical procurement process that organizations have long relied upon to ensure, again, transparency and best pricing. One critical component that we like to think about as we talk with public plan sponsors is that while you are not subject to ERISA and not a fiduciary as defined by ERISA, you still have responsibility and oversight over the plan to ensure that the plan is functioning as it needs to and is subject to all of the laws and requirements by the IRS, but also to ensure that it is working efficiently and fairly for your employee base. These plans can be a significant portion of someone's total savings, and it's critically important that we ensure that plan sponsors have clean oversight of these plans. Many state laws point to ERISA either as a guideline or as a requirement for these plans to follow. So while you're not subject to the Department of Labor and the ERISA by letter, you may have other fiduciary requirements depending on the specifics of your state law. Let's take a look at what has come about from sort of that lack of transparency we've seen with these retirement plans. Again, because there is less oversight and less reporting required for fees specifically, we are seeing higher record keeping fees for public plans compared to their private sector counterparts. We are very, very often seeing multiple record keepers serving the same organization. So you have not only the opportunity to invest and save with PERS and through PERS deferred compensation plan, but you also may have a deferred compensation plan with record keeper A or record keeper B, and participants have to pick where they are going to save, typically with very little by way of differentiation between these record keepers, often looking to HR to help them decide where should I save. And again, I think that puts a lot of burden and pressure on these HR departments to help participants make the best decision for them. Again, without a lot of guidance. So, multiple record keepers can really complicate the enrollment process and the ongoing servicing that employees receive. We see multiple duplicative plans, so exactly the same thing. Sometimes we see participants can save in maybe multiple 457B plans. And so they're having to make that kind of selection, decide where they want to go. But then also you have to monitor the limits, right? You can only put so much away in these plans that's split across multiple places. It's increasing that administrative burden, typically without a lot of improvement in service. We are also seeing a really high utilization of proprietary investments, meaning that your record keeper is also the one that is providing the investments within the plan. So you, for example, are using Mission Square, formerly ICMA. They also have their own investment products. And so you may have a Mission Square retirement plan with 20 or so Mission Square products within it. And this is true of many other record keepers across the industry. This is what the private sector looked like a decade or so ago, and they have since moved to what we call an open architecture investment environment, where you can pick any investment for the plan from the world of investment managers and not just your record keeper. We're also seeing the utilization of proprietary services, things like managed accounts, or other model portfolios. These are typically options available to participants. They come at no cost to the plan. And so many organizations are happy to provide them, but it's an additional revenue source to that record keeper. And it's not always clear how that is communicated to participants and whether they understand the impact of these additional services. We see many record keepers keeping the public plans on their legacy platforms. The record keeping industry has continued to evolve and services have evolved, and many record keepers have modernized the underlying systems that they use to do record keeping. And because there is little oversight of the governmental side, they have not moved them over to what we would call the more modern platform. And finally, fees are often essentially invisible to participants. They are not explicit stated fees that you can see on their statement, but rather a reduction in the total performance of their investments, something that we call in the industry revenue sharing, which leads to opaque fees. No one knows exactly how much they're paying, and also uneven fees. Someone could pay more based on how they're invested compared to someone else, even if they have similar account balances. So this lack of transparency has led to a lot of things that we think drag down the performance of participants' accounts and make it more difficult for the organization as a whole to administer the plan. So it really reduces the efficiency and effectiveness of these retirement plans. I want to talk a little bit about some work that we've done with a county recently. So they came to us with a fragmented retirement plan structure. They had a 401A plan and a 457B plan, and that 457B had multiple record keepers, right? They were using 3 different providers and had been for many, many years. Because those assets were split amongst 3 different record keepers, they were paying higher fees than they would have if it had been under a single plan. Again, the larger the total plan, typically the lower fees can be negotiated. And there was a lot of inefficiency and redundancy in plan administration. Payroll files were going to 3 different vendors, enrollment forms were being filled out so that were different for each provider. And ultimately, people that were joining the organization had to sit down in HR's office and try and figure out where they should put their money. It was a complex process that required a lot of manual intervention. And these were very busy people. And so we're looking for ways to make that administration easier and improve the whole structure for employees. So we worked with them to create a request for proposal, an RFP process that met the needs of their procurement requirements and sent that out. And ultimately, after what I think was a very successful RFP process, including interviews with finalists, they were able to negotiate and move to a single record keeper for both the 401A and the 457B. They selected one of their incumbents and was able to reduce fees significantly. You can see here the estimated annual record keeping fee with the three providers was $140,000 each year, had cut that in the first year down to $60,000. So less than half of what the plan had been paying before. These are dollars that will stay in participants' accounts and will be compounded for years to come. The other, I think, really positive outcomes of this RFP was a streamlined investment menu. It moved away from 40 plus proprietary options with their three providers down to 18 low cost diversified options that were from the sort of best in class investment providers that now can be overseen and reviewed by the investment committee. Replacements can be made, and there are much more flexibility for participants and for those overseeing the plan. And finally, the participant experience was really enhanced through clearer choices. No longer were they trying to decide whether they should go with record keeper A or record keeper B or record keeper C. They had a single option and allowed for the communication for participants to be much more clear and direct. We could coordinate with a single individual who was providing that participant education and advice and create some really clear messaging campaigns. Their goal for this year is to increase participation. And so we'll work with those individuals on a campaign to help increase participation across the board. And that can only be done because the plan is now speaking with a single voice. And really helped to ensure that participants understand their benefit. And I don't want to say that making this kind of change is easy. There's certainly stakeholders within any organization that are going to be resistant to a change like this. Perhaps they like the retirement plan as it is, they like the provider or the investments available, and can be resistant to that kind of change. I think the good news is that you can really speak to these folks and get some buy-in from those stakeholders. It's hard to deny cutting fees by more than half. And so through some practice and some careful communication, these kinds of changes can be done. And I think ultimately the benefits can be seen by all employees and everyone working with the plan. So it is an undertaking, but with some experience and practical communication guidelines can get folks there into a really successful outcome. Want to talk a little bit about our recommended first steps. So we recommend if you're taking just a handful of actions to improve a retirement plan, you should hire an independent consultant to evaluate plan performance and vendor contracts. The very first step is to understand exactly what services the plan is meant to be receiving and what those fees are, and understand the performance and expectations of the investments within that plan. Typically, these plans are complex and you need some industry expertise in order to do that, independent of your record keeper. And so hiring that independent consultant is the best first step. There's been a lot of consolidation in the retirement plan industry. We've seen record keepers acquire other record keepers. So the service provider you have today might not have been the one that was hired initially. And so there are open questions on What does that do to services? What does that do to the contracts and agreements that are in place now? Have those changed? And what does that oversight look like? And again, an independent consultant can assist in that work. We also recommend doing regular benchmarking of fees and services. As I've said, record-keeping fees consolidate significantly and have been consolidating and declining over the past decade. And in many cases, the public sector has missed out on that decline of fees because there are not any publicly available information on what these plans are paying. Again, not filing those 5500s means that there is no good, easy way for these plans to understand their total fees compared to the market. So again, using that independent consultant to benchmark those fees is really, really critical. As I said, we've also seen services continue to expand and modernize, and especially through technology. And in many cases, these public sector plans have been left behind on legacy platforms. So again, understanding not only what's available in the marketplace, but what might be available with your record keeper today that you're not receiving, again, is critically important. We recommend implementing a transparent procurement process with competitive bidding. So if the retirement plan has not gone through a procurement process or an RFP in the last 10 years, it makes sense to do that now and incorporate a regular RFP process into the ongoing plan. Governmental organizations are already doing this across the board with many of their services. It's time to include the retirement plan within that process. And again, an experienced consultant can assist in conducting that procurement process while making sure that it aligns with all of the requirements of your organization. And finally, we recommend adopting a voluntary disclosure practice that is similar to ERISA standards. Again, it's not a requirement. These programs are not governed by ERISA, but there is clear evidence that additional transparency can assist with negotiating fees and services and build trust with participants and aligns more closely with how these organizations are already operating. I think there are a few benefits to not being covered by ERISA around perhaps the delivery of these disclosures. ERISA requires either mail as a default or email, perhaps because these organizations aren't governed by ERISA, stick it on an intranet or email to everyone rather than mailing to a handful of folks. I think there are easy changes and efficiencies that can be created by going with the ERISA standard, but customized a bit to meet the needs of your organization. I want to talk a little bit about what an independent consultant can do in addition to assisting with the initial procurement process and the ongoing RFP services. Because again, I think this is a critical component to ensuring that plans stay up to date from a fee and service perspective. So these are the four services that an independent consultant, a retirement plan consultant can provide. Obviously, investment advisory services are critical, helping your organization to oversee those investments. Many of these plans, as I said, are using all proprietary products, essentially whatever the record keeper has made available, and no one is monitoring these investments to ensure that they are performing well for participants and are prudent for employees to use. One record keeper recently reduced their investment fees by a significant portion, in some cases, almost 0.5% less expensive than they had been previously. They didn't do that simply by cutting fees. They changed the way they were investing those assets. And the question becomes, was that the right move? Are these performing as they were with just lower fees, or is there a significant change to the performance of those funds? Without some oversight, without an investment review, it's impossible for plan sponsors to know and to monitor these investment changes. So that work can be critically important. We've talked a little bit about record keepers and the oversight process there. Again, I think a really critical component of record keeper oversight is to ensure that services are keeping it up to date with what is available, and making sure that the services are meeting the needs of your organization. Again, you can set goals for what might be most important to your employees and to your retirement base. And then if your record keeper is not helping you to achieve those goals, perhaps it's time to look for another partner. Again, the services have enhanced for the past several years, and the technology used to conduct these plans has improved and improved. And government plans have historically just missed out on many of those enhancements. And so it's really time to make sure that your record keeper is meeting your needs and meeting the needs of participants. The third is fiduciary governance, building a strong plan management and oversight. So again, you can do a lot of work to get the plan up to date from a fee and investment perspective today, but that is a continuing and ongoing process. So a critical component of the overall year-long success of a retirement plan is having a group of individuals that has responsibility and oversight of the plan, that can continue to negotiate fees, that can continue to monitor investment. So building a specific retirement plan committee, outlining roles and responsibilities, and then outlining who the committee reports to regularly is critically important. I was speaking with a colleague the other day who was working with a city in California, and they had to establish an entirely new committee to conduct the oversight of their retirement benefit. So they went from essentially just the day-to-day HR folks handling enrollments and contributions and the payroll components to a dedicated group of individuals that is tasked with ensuring that the retirement plan is running efficiently. They created governance documents, a charter, an investment policy statement, and reporting back to their board. And so really critical oversight components that are already built into most of the work that these organizations are doing. Establishing that for the retirement plan committee has done wonders for the work that they're doing with that group. So really strong governance is critically important, and an independent consultant can assist with creating those processes and again, aligning them to your organization's requirements. And finally, plan operations are critical. These plans are not subject to ERISA, but are subject to the Internal Revenue Service and the Internal Revenue Code. And ensuring that the plan follows all of the requirements is critical to making sure that it stays a plan that is functional and available to employees. The retirement industry is changing all the time. We get updates from the Secure Act and Secure 2.0 that have changed the operations of how these plans work. And without assistance on the oversight of those and implementing those changes, government organizations can be left a bit at sea. And so again, ensuring that plan operations are happening appropriately, that you're staying on top of new regulations and oversight requirements is a critical component of the overall work that organizations are doing. And again, I think it's important to emphasize that a functional and healthy retirement plan benefits not only the employees that are engaging with the plan, are saving, putting their hard-earned dollars into these plans, making sure that they work appropriately for them, but it really helps the organization from both an efficiency standpoint of HR and finance, making sure the plan is functional and as easy to use as possible, but also as a recruitment and retention tool. As we look to make sure that people are choosing to work in the public sector and serve their communities, we want to make sure that we are doing all that we can to get the highest level of benefits available to them. And in many cases, the pension plan, the public pension plans, has served as that gold star of benefits, and it still serves as that gold star. But these additional savings components are really critical to the day-to-day retirement readiness for public sector workers. We want to make sure that they will be here and serving them well for years to come, and that they are equal or better than their private sector counterparts. Again, because of this underserved, these plans have been underserved by the advisor community. They just have lacked the help to keep up with the continuing evolving landscape. And we want to make sure that these plans get all of the benefits that the private sector has worked for over the past several decades. In a quick review, well-run retirement plans, again, benefit both employees and employers, again, through efficiency and effective work. Many of the people running these retirement plans are also participants in these retirement plans. So dollars saved may not affect the headline budget of these organizations, but they certainly impact the retirement readiness for participants. And you can see direct dollars that will stay in retirement plans rather than being paid to these service providers through additional fee negotiations, through service negotiations, and through a transparent procurement process that many of you are already using. We know that transparency builds trust, it increases oversight, and it improves efficiency. We think voluntarily opting into additional transparency, to additional disclosures, can only help increase that trust. The workforce in the public sector really relies on that transparency. And I think that this is just one place to align the retirement benefit with the way that all of the other benefits and the employment relationship works. And we truly believe that this transparency will help improve the plan and improve the relationship employees have with the plan. We recommend you evaluate your plan today. Multnomah Group is here and happy to help with that. We have a couple of resources that we will be providing along with this webinar, but we also wanted to offer for anyone who is interested a complimentary fee benchmarking service. Again, we would just need a little bit of information about your plan, and we can compare the fees that you are paying for record keeping to what we believe a similar sized organization would receive as bids in the open marketplace. Again, we are seeing by and large, every public plan that we run into is paying fees that are above what we think is industry standard, either through a lack of fee negotiation year over year, or because the plans are split between multiple providers. And again, that dilutes the buying power of the plan as a whole. So really benchmarking the total retirement benefit to what we see in the marketplace can allow for plans to really negotiate those fees with record keepers. And we've been very successful in the handful of recent RFPs we've completed in reducing fees significantly for these plans. We are providing you at the end of this webinar with a couple of resources. So you will get a copy and a recording of this webinar along with the slides. You will also receive our guide, Closing the Gap, How Transparency Can Improve Public Retirement Outcomes. We will also be including the case study that I highlighted earlier in this presentation with real world outcomes for an organization we worked with recently. And if you have any questions on any of those, you are welcome to reach out to me with my contact information earlier in this presentation, or any other Multnomah Group consultant, and we would be thrilled to help you evaluate your plan and understand where you are compared to the market. With that, I will look and see if we've got any questions from anyone, and certainly can follow up with anyone that has questions specific to their circumstances and specific to their record keeper or organization. All right. I think then we can wrap up. Again, a pleasure to speak with you today. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to think about your retirement plan and how it might be improved through transparency and through some best practices. I want to thank you for your time and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.